Hello, welcome back. This is part 2 of our little Proverbs study. The other day when we met, I was talking about Proverbs 14:1, and I told you I was going to add Proverbs 14:4 to our study. There are a couple of my favorite Proverbs that I studied recently, and I wanted to share them with you, some insights that I had gleaned from my studies and from spending time pondering those Proverbs. So today we're going to go back to Proverbs 14:4. But just a reminder that the book of Proverbs has many subjects which can be studied together as a unit. And they do talk about practical wisdom and building and maintaining a home. The section that we're in is called the Proverbs of Solomon, and it's mostly antithetical parallelisms, which is antithetical means contradictory. And so you'll see that today when we talk about a woman who has an ox and who doesn't have an ox. Last time we met, we were talking about the woman who built her house without using her hands and the woman who tore her house down using her hands. So those are the contradictory kinds of things that come out in an antithetical parallelism. And there's a lot of that in Proverbs. So we're here at Proverbs 14:4, and at first glance, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with building a home. However, the neglect of husbandry is the way to poverty. You may remember husbandry is a term for those who take care of animals. So the wise woman builds her home through bearing children and through its proper functioning and maintenance. In order to maintain oxen, the owner must be willing to get dirty. And if the husbandman, whether that's a man or a woman, is not thoughtful about the care and support of the cattle, then the cattle will not be able to be maintained. And through the life of contemplation, though it seems cleaner, it is the business of an outside world with its cares and disturbances that actually brings the increase. And I hope that as you go through this lesson with me, you'll be able to make that transition between an ox and maybe for you it's a car. So an ox is important to family life. The Israelite culture would have understood that an ox is far superior to a horse. The ox lives longer and is less prone to disease and does not need to be shod. He is a very steady animal, and his feed is cheaper than a horse. His manure can be used for profit for the family, and when he is old, he can serve the family with the meat of his flesh, his horns, and his hide. The metonymy of the manger is that the manger also represents a stall or the crib for animals. Metonymy is another fancy word that we talked about in our last study. Metonymy is a word that means analogy, maybe metaphor. So the metonymy of a manger doesn't actually have to be a manger, but the manger can be the example of a metaphor, much like what I said, maybe the manger is a vehicle for you. If the manger is empty, there is no food in the barn, and neither is there any animal. So the metonymy is the whole ball of wax surrounding this need for a manger. Also, the ox was the king of domesticated animals. In many homes, there was a room in the house where the domesticated animals were kept. And in this case, the wise woman who builds her house will also make room in her day to care for the animals. In this case, the ox upon which her family is so dependent. Her husband would see the importance of preparing for the future by investing in the present. Owning an ox is an investment which will produce a future yield. It will require expert management from the wife in order to put food into the manger. This food becomes the seed money for the upcoming harvest. Perhaps the family will have to scrimp and save in order to give strength to the ox. This is the family that recognizes the importance of investments, even though it may require sacrifice. So just as a woman must use the wisdom of others to build her home, the husband must also be part of the business of the world in order to work his field and bring increase to his family. In this way, both the wife and the husband of the home will work together in unity to prosper the family. Oxen were required by the Torah to rest on the Shabbat, on the Sabbath. This would include and indicate that there's a time to work and a time to rest. Even in allowing rest, abundance would result. And the husbandman was also directed to rest on the Sabbath. He is also right beside the ox as he plows through the field. It is through the expert direction of the husbandman that the ox knows where to go next and what to do. This husbandman is fully involved in the production of this harvest. He is in it with both feet. It was his words of encouragement and love which encouraged the ox to continue. A harsh tone and a tight rein will not easily produce anything. Investments are good, especially safe investments. Oxen were safe investments, and the family was fairly certain to have a good return for their labor. Oxen were common tools in the Israelite family. Today, we must evaluate the tools of our culture and determine which are worth investing in. Though a family with more than one ox was more wealthy than another, the tools for today's families do not need to include every new model that comes out. Proverbs 14:4 says that there will be an abundant harvest. And as believers, we seek for abundance in our lives, but superabundance is not the goal. The goal is an abundant harvest. So again, we have been looking at Proverbs 14 verse 1 and 14 verse 4. And in Proverbs 14 verse 1, we talked about a woman who built her home and the wise woman who didn't even have to use her hands, and she was able to build her house and not tear it down. Conversely, the foolish woman was using her hands and even tearing down her house. And then in Proverbs 14:4, a woman without an ox, she's not going to have a lot of prosperity. So she's going to have to get her hands dirty. The manger's going to have to be dirty if we're going to have a harvest. From the strength of an ox, where there are oxen, comes an abundant harvest, and the manger is full, and the family is preparing for the future. So I hope that you have kind of enjoyed a little bit this study on the Proverbs, a little bit of the parallelism, the metonymies, and that this was a blessing to you. And I hope you'll come back and spend some more time with me. Have a good evening. Bye for now.